going in the room here. Prospering is more than just what you have in your bank account. Prospering is the blessing that God bestows upon us each and every day. We are able to inhale and exhale. On the first day of the week, every last one of us got to lay by in store as God has prospered. Paul had previously mentioned this to the Corinthians. That's why in our text in verse 1 he says it's really unnecessary. He uses the word superfluous. It's really redundant for me to have to say the same thing to you again. But see, Paul knew that they were like many of us are, willing and eager to give. They had been ready for over a year, Paul says according to verse 2 of our text. But just so that the unfortunate occasion would not happen of him arriving to pick up the offering, and for some unforeseen reason they were not ready, he decides to send the brethren ahead of him so that they can go ahead and gather up the collection to make sure that their benevolent obligations were completely fulfilled. All right. In other words, sometimes things will happen that will cause us to become willfully neglectful of what we know we ought to be doing. That's right now. Amen. Up in here. And so that's why Paul even emphasized the fact that when he was coming to Corinth, some brethren of Macedonia may have been coming with him. And since he had been bragging about them and how liberal they were in their giving, he didn't want to get there and what he said be amiss. Yes, sir. Amen. Up in here. You know, preachers talk. Yes, sir. One to another. When I leave here today, a brother's going to call me from out of town and say, Tillman, how was service this morning? Amen. Up in here. I was oh, Doc, we had a good time. I give him the number of folk we had, and he said, well, how was your collection? We just talk about different things like that. And because, see, that's a motivating factor. Amen. If you have a few folk who love God and they're able to support the work of God, it encourages other congregations who need to do the same thing that God already wants them to do. And so we share that information as a motivating factor. And so Paul here, even in this text, indicates that when I come, some of the brethren from Macedonia are going to come with me, and I don't want everything I've been bragging about of y'all to be amiss. Amen. So therefore, I need you to understand, not only do you need to give, but you need to give generously and liberally. That's right. Now let me dig a little bit deeper. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, beginning at verse number 6. Paul explains the benefit of being bountifully benevolent in your giving. If you know that you're supposed to give. Yes. And you're wondering how to give. Come on now. Paul helps you know how. Amen. He says that there is a benefit to being bountifully benevolent in your giving. Paul says here in verse number 6, but this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. Amen. Sowing and reaping is a common agricultural proverb which taught that a poor harvest is a result of poor sowing. Amen. Did you catch that? Yes, a poor harvest is a result of poor sowing. Look at Proverbs chapter 11 and beginning at verse number 24. Proverbs chapter 11 beginning at verse number 24. And let me show you where Paul pulls this idea from. All right. Proverbs chapter 11 verse number 24. Wise man Solomon said, there is that scattereth and yet increaseth the more you put out, the more you stand to bring in. Scattering is the biblical analogy of one being indiscriminate with what they're putting out. There is no cautiousness in the scattering. When you scatter, you're just putting it out there. When you're scattering it, you want it to go somewhere. And you're trying to get as much of it out as you possibly can. Scattering is what Solomon says grants an increase. And there is that withholdeth more than is meet, and the result is poverty. He explains unto us that this agricultural proverb teaches us that the less you plant, the less you gonna get. Amen. Up in here. If you being stingy, putting the seed in the ground, don't you expect a whole lot of fruit to come up from the ground. But the other side of it is that if you plant a whole lot, you stand to have a whole lot in your return. Paul used this agricultural analogy of sowing and reaping in farming to show the Corinthians that giving and receiving spiritually operate on the same principle. God decided that the principle in agriculture was going to be the principle in spiritual giving that he was going to use with his children. That's right. God decided that you should not expect a whole lot of blessings from him if you have not been a blessing to anybody else. In farming, he shows us that the only thing that comes up is what you have put down. And with giving, the only thing you get back is determined by what you've given out. Proverbs chapter 22 and beginning in verse number 9. Proverbs chapter 22 and beginning in verse number 9. He that hath a bountiful life shall be blessed. Don't you want to be blessed? Yeah. God says, he that hath a bountiful life shall be blessed. For he giveth of his bread unto the poor. Galatians chapter 6 and beginning in verse number 7. Galatians chapter 6 and beginning in verse number 7. The law of sowing and reaping is a law that's certainly enforced when it comes to our giving. Galatians chapter 6 and beginning at verse number 7. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Most of the time we use that in a bad way, which is true now. Amen. You sow bad seeds, you're going to reap a bad harvest. But this also applies to our giving and our receiving from God. Whatever we sow, we are guaranteed to reap. Look at verse number 9. And let us not be weary in well-doing. For in due season, you ain't going to reap when you want to reap. God says in due season, which means God controls the season in which you're going to reap. So if you don't get it tomorrow, don't stop sowing. Come on in the room here. Plus, you don't need to be using God like no slot machine nowhere. Oh, come on in the room here. God ain't no level that